live mic over there. So welcome to the mall stage, and I'll just throw out something for both of you guys to get things started. Just something pretty basic, which is, where did you first get involved in the production? How did you join the crew and cast of Dawn of the Dead? We could start with either one of you.
I went to Carnegie Mellon University and was best friends with Tom Savini, and he said, we're going to go shoot this movie in the Monroeville Mall. I said, that sounds great. And I'd like to know what happened to the big clock that used to be.
I know, that's gone. Everybody's been talking about that. That's gone.
I was a theater major at Point Park, and they came to Point Park. John Amplis was doing the casting, and he said, we need someone to be a stunt zombie and get hit by a truck for $25. And so I jumped up because I thought everybody in the class was going to jump up, and I was the only one standing. So I sort of got cast by default. And there's a bit where Tom gets, it's a famous bit actually, because if you slow the DVD down where Tom gets hit by the truck, you can actually see the mini tramp that he jumped on. And I'm the zombie that catches him. And George came up to me that day and he said, hey, we need someone to get hit by a sledgehammer, which was with Taso, and you know, be a stunt zombie. And I said, well, do I get another $25? He said, you sure do. I said, I'm in. So Taso and I, who went to high school together, we've known each other the longest probably of anybody on the film, because we were both Churchill graduates, Churchill High School graduates. And Taso and I did the bit, and then that night they made me a biker, and I worked another 25, 30 days as a biker on the film.
Now, a lot of the other folks who've been up here already have been talking a lot about the sort of dedication that seemed to come from everybody on the cast and crew about getting this done, about everybody involved in the mall. What's you guys' impression, your perspective on what it was like shooting here all those nights and working to get this film together? Obviously, you're not dealing with a huge budget with a lot of resources.
We were young at the time, but the minute you stepped into the Monroeville Mall where we grew up shopping in the middle of the night, and you open the doors and you're the only ones in there, you just immediately get jetted back to middle school. We were just bad children running around doing whatever we wanted in the dark, in the mall, climbing, geeking, crawling, cruise. And the whole movie was just like that. We got paid to do the same thing, run around, be bad with guns. Jump down, get hit by cars. We're driving cars in the mall. So it couldn't have been better.
Yeah, I grew up in this mall. Where I grew up as a kid is it's less than a half a mile from here probably. I could sit in my front lawn and watch them build the Monroeville Mall. And I can remember when at this corner here there was a G.C. Murphy's or a Woolworths, one or the other, and there were ducks. There were live ducks in this mall.
There was a lot of water.
There was water, there was ponds, you see a lot of them in the movie actually. You see a lot of the fountains in Dawn of the Dead. And there were live ducks. So we would get hoagies, which are subs, which are, grinders if you're from Philly. We would get these hoagies that had onions in them, and we would feed the onions to the ducks. So it was great to come into this mall, like Taso said. And I drove a golf cart around this mall all night long, just, for the hell of it, because it was a lot of fun.
Now, Taso, from what I understand, one of the famous stories involves some of the special effects that went into one of your crucial scenes. And one of the things I remember, I think Tom Savini talking about was how very careful you were in washing things before they touched you. Maybe you could tell us a little about the background of that.
They had to get my guts ripped open, and so Tom, of course, a genius special effects guy, he said, I can't make intestines, so he just went to the butcher and got real intestines. It was a lot cheaper and easier. And I said, I'm not putting those on me. So he said, we have to. So I went into the bathroom, because I remember my dad would eat them. but only after my mother would wash them and like drive a pencil through them and spoil them, right? So I sat there in the sink with soap and water and washed these intestines first before I let them get near me.
Now you had a lot of connection with Tom and some of the effects. Can you guys talk a little bit about, we did a little bit of this earlier today with some of the other guests, about what the process was like here in the mall and on set, doing all the makeup that was involved for all the many, not just the big scenes like you were in, but all the extras that were involved throughout.
The first thing we did when we got here at 9, I think they closed the mall and we all started showing up. The first thing we did was at a big meeting room upstairs about halfway down, and hundreds of extras would come in a line, and there was me and Tom and Jeannie and 3 or 4 other people, and all we did was start painting everybody with the gray makeup. And then some people, especially the more interesting looking people, would go to the next station and get more stuff added. Tom would add pieces for close-up zombies. And so that took an hour, maybe 2 hours just for that. And then George would start calling for shots of what he needed. So, there'd be a lot of background zombies and then a few up close. And for all the action stuff, we would do a lot of it ourselves. We'd be bikers, we'd be zombies, whatever was needed. We just jumped in there, put on different costumes.
Played multiple people.
Multiple people,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, throughout. And what about that? I know there's famous stories like Tom doing the big dive off the second floor
Into mattresses and boxes, and of course he went a little too far and smashed his heels on the marble floor and walked around
That was the second take.
2 canes.
Yes.
And you guys doing all this stuff, obviously you're not talking about a situation where there's a lot of safety issues. You're all jumping in and doing this yourself and just doing
There wasn't
whatever it
anybody
takes.
else.
Safety was not a concern. I mean, years later when we did a movie that had some kind of budget, like Night Riders, and we had a budget for stuntmen, it was pretty amazing watching them do what they did, that we did, into boxes and mattresses, and so it was really an amazing experience. We all just sort of did what needed to be done, and if it was Taso swinging off of the second floor on a rope right before he gets torn apart, that's what we did. We all just jumped in and did it.
What was it that was keeping you guys going? Doing I know also there was the what was it, like a month break where you had to skip around December for Christmas and everything. But obviously there's a lot of heart going on here with going through with this production. What kept everybody together as a team?
It wasn't just keeping us going. It was hard to hold us back because it was my first film, and everybody was having such a great time. Everybody had ideas, and so it was hard. We didn't know that you weren't supposed to. If you had an idea, we just ran up to George in the middle of cigarettes and said, "We got this idea, and we're going to stick a pencil in the guy's ear." He was like, "That's great. That's a great idea." And he would shoot it. He and Mike would just squeeze it in between the shooting. There was no money involved. It was like, we had this idea. Sure, why not? The creativity was as big as you could imagine.
Some of the fight scenes in the movie, I mean, they're huge. We're fighting off 50, 60 zombies at one time. And most of the fight...
Real biker gang.
Yeah, they brought in a real motorcycle gang who weren't really trained actors or anything. So most of the fight sequences were Tom and Taso and I just saying, okay, we're going to punch you, we're going to kick you, we're going to slam you in the head, we're going to, and it all happened on the spot. There wasn't a lot of, we didn't have a choreography meeting or anything like that. We just figured out, all right, we got 50 zombies, how are we going to kill them? And then Tom would say, we killed somebody like that last night, let's kill them a different way. And so we would figure out a different way to kill them, The whole machete thing was kind of an impromptu thing that Tom prepared, and it wasn't like he had months to prepare that. He did it in days, and grabbed Lenny Lee's and made him famous.
Were there things that you knew coming in that were important to keep an eye on as far as working inside the mall? I mean, obviously you knew when you had to be in and out. Were there any other things about restrictions on how to use the mall?
Yeah.
That's an interesting
So there were
laugh right there.
rules, but
Don't touch this.
Yeah, we kind of didn't pay attention to the rules. And the movie shot in between the Muzak. The Muzak would go off at 10 o'clock at night, and then would come back on at 7 o'clock in the morning. So that was our shooting schedule. Because they had, for some reason in 1977, there was no way to shut off the Muzak. So we shot between Muzaks, and that's the way we worked. But, you know, I don't remember, there was a window that got broken one night. There was with the Volkswagen, we drove that into one of the pillars. Other than that, there really wasn't a lot of damage done.
I was being dragged behind it at the time.
Taso was doing the stunt, and it was, and he hit a pillar. But people still say that they can find, not anymore, but that there's stage blood. There was stage blood for years all over the mall.
Oh, and I should mention too, by the way, for all of you who are here, if you have any questions at all for either guest, both, please feel free to raise your hand right now, say whatever you like. I want to make sure everybody is involved. Anyone have anything? Yes, right away.
We went to Carnegie Mellon together. Tom went in, after he got back from Vietnam, he went and traded acting classes for teaching makeup. So Tom was my makeup teacher. But he was also in all of our acting and dancing and movement classes that we had at Carnegie Mellon. And so the two of us clicked immediately and we were out back sword fighting, you know, after school was out all day, every day, sword fighting. People just thought we were nuts. And then we started shooting, you know, blood in the middle of school. They didn't think that was funny. Pranks, but we had so much fun. And so when he said we're going to do this movie, this zombie movie thing, that was really cool.
Now, was there something, I asked this of a couple other folks earlier too. I mean, I'm from Baltimore, so I noticed there's such a distinct sense of a hometown feel to the history of this film and Romero's work. And is there something particular about, like you said, that this is something that was childhood for you in this area? It's something that seems very distinctive to your experience, not just of being involved, but that's very much something that the local community embraces in memory of this movie. What is about this that sort of connects to the history of Pittsburgh and Monroeville?
They embrace it now. Back then, I don't know if they embraced it. George has always been here. He started doing sports.
Well, no, he started doing Night of the Living Dead, and then he did.
Was Night of the Living Dead before you?
Yeah. They did that to make money. So after Night of the Living Dead, they actually did another film, and then they started doing these. They did Crazies, and they did Sometimes Vanilla and Jack's Wife, and those were a couple films. And they didn't really make any money, so they needed to do something for money. So they started doing the sports, the NFL films, which made them a lot of money, which was great. Getting back to the question, Pittsburghers. If you're a true Pittsburgher, you love anything Pittsburgh. You know, you really do. And there are certain things that would fail in any other city in the world except in Pittsburgh, because Pittsburghers have that loyalty. And Pittsburghers are very proud of the fact that Dawn of the Dead was shot here, and the fact that this mall, which previous management didn't really embrace its zombie history, now this one does, which is great. But I think Pittsburghers as a whole are very proud. You know, we're still very proud that we won the Super Bowl in 1975. We still talk about it, you know. So the Stanley Cup, yeah, 2 in a row. So it's just something we as Pittsburghers grow up with, and it does get local. You know, the people that grew up in this area, most of the people were zombies. You know, they loved coming up here for $1. It was $1. They got $1 a night to be a zombie, and they just showed up in droves. I mean, I can remember my house was in the landing pattern for the Monroeville Airport, where the helicopter scene was done. I mean, that's how close it all was. You know, back in those days.
Now, both of you guys have any history of, were you fans of horror prior to working on this? Was it just whatever the movie was you were involved in, or was there a particular interest?
You know, I've always had a film passion. You know, I've always been passionate about it. I always knew this is what I was going to do with my life. And I guess the biggest horror film up until us was The Exorcist. And The Exorcist came out in 1973 while I was still in high school. And I actually remember Night of the Living Dead. Let me go back for a second. Night of the Living Dead came out when I was in 3rd grade. And it was just this phenomenon that everybody was talking about, even in elementary school. When The Exorcist came out, that was like unbelievable, you know? And then I think the next step in horror was Dawn of the Dead. And so there really wasn't a lot for us except the classics, like the classic Frankenstein, the classic Dracula, some Mario Bava films coming out of Italy. You know, there really wasn't a lot of horror. It wasn't a big genre when we were growing up. So we kind of, I think, not only propelled it forward, but redefined horror with Dawn of the Dead.
I was a big action guy. Errol Flynn was my hero. I was going to be a sword fighter, and that's what Tom and I had in common.
That's why you had to do the swing then.
We did the swing, and Tom has a sword. His character has a sword, and so you know that I didn't think much about it growing up because, like Marty said, we were in between genres. So.
Well, you mentioned Mario Bava, and that's one of the things about this movie that certainly fans know well is Dario Argento's involvement in the way this became sort of a co-production that then led to Italy embracing this so much. You were talking about Dawn sort of reinventing horror and starting a new era of the genre. What else do you think about the way Dawn of the Dead seems to have really sparked a massive explosion in other countries as well? Italy really took it on, and for many years after, Japan,
Germany.
even cultures that didn't have a zombie as a figure in their culture borrowed it mainly from Dawn of the Dead in exploring this idea.
Yeah. Why are we all still here? All the people come to these conventions. Why? I don't know why. I don't know what the answer is. It hits everybody somewhere deep inside. This creepy feeling like, oh, that's us. It could be us. You know, no, we have to fight that. We got to be the heroes and fight that. But really, look, it's my sister. I recognize that guy. You know, that's my uncle.
It usually was.
Yeah.
It was a relative around here. You know, The Walking Dead doesn't exist without Dawn of the Dead.
Right.
More so than Night of the Living Dead. You know, because Night was great. It was in a farmhouse. It wasn't like in a public place. You didn't really have, you know, the size of, you know, Dawn was bigger, and it really set the stage, you know, for something like The Walking Dead or any of the zombie movies that have come out, even World War Z. You know, I mean, the biggest debate, and I'm sure we could all debate it here, is fast-moving zombies or slow-moving zombies. You know, it's almost like there are two different camps. But even that discussion doesn't happen. That discussion doesn't even happen without Dawn of the Dead.
I mean, one of the things that I do regularly is teach a college course entirely about zombie movies. This is one of them. This is one of the conversations we even were having it earlier today, that people think Night of the Living Dead reinvented so much, but really Dawn of the Dead is where a lot of the template for Kirkman and everything else comes from.
Night was the first time you saw a kill on screen, you know, and that was revolutionary in itself. And just the way George directed it, you know, it wasn't a big studio picture like Frankenstein or Wolfman or any of those things. It was a low budget, run and gun kind of a movie, and it, you know, so without Night of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead doesn't happen. So I guess you have to kind of go back.
Yeah, sure.
Here's the difference, and I don't know what it means, and I'm not sure many people have thought about it or touched on it. The old horror movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, there was one alien, there's one monster. There's one monster that everybody has to fight. How does this monster get here? What's its weakness? What are its strengths? But the whole idea of your child dying and then becoming the monster, and then somebody else becoming the monster, and every one of us could become the monster. It's like, how do you fight that? And then you have the whole, do I want to fight that? How am I supposed to kill my child, you know, who's coming after me to eat me?
We were talking about a little of that earlier today with Ralph Langer too, about that, and that's that idea too, that as our culture changed, we shifted from a singular monster that you're facing, like you said, it's alien in some form to the idea that now it's your family
We're
and
all
friends.
monsters, right?
And
Somewhere
that-
inside of us.
and it also reverses from a group of people fighting a singular creature to a group of creatures besieging a small group or an individual. You are now the lone survivor hero against the horde. And that's something also that, like, and I've talked about this a lot, Night of the Living Dead, when you watch it carefully, doesn't really necessarily end with the idea that the world is over. It looks like they might have it under control.
That's
Dawn
what it
is
started
very much
touching on.
this is
The whole apocalyptic
Yes.
theme. That was the first wave in a crest of a whole new horror genre, the whole apocalyptic. And now everybody thinks, I mean, kids grow up now thinking soon, the world's going to die. Zombie apocalypse, some kind of an apocalypse is going to happen. And is that because of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and things like that? Or is there somewhere in our subconscious where we think sooner or later there's going to be a plague of some kind that's going to wipe out a bunch of us, and hopefully we're part of the lone survivor group?
Yeah.
I love it.
Anyone else have any questions you want to throw in? No? Otherwise, we'll keep pontificating about things. Oh, there you go.
Actually, I just wanted to ask Taso about Friday the 13th, filming it. If you guys filmed it at Novi Bosco in New
Right.
Jersey, do you have any like stories about the filming of it, or did you guys stay in the cabins when you filmed it? So you were there for how many months, or?
Yeah, oh, I love that story. Oh, I have so many stories. Friday the 13th, we went there after Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead was a lark. Right? We had a lot of fun. Suddenly, we're movie stars. And, oh man, we're going to do another horror movie, a real movie. So we went up to Camp Novi Bosco in the Poconos, and they put us in a Boy Scout camp. And just to be efficient, Tom and I stayed there in the cabins, and we baked molds for all the effects in the pizza ovens, which of course the chef was really mad because the stink of rubber never came out. So everything he made in the ovens smelled like latex. This is Marty's favorite story. We shut down for a weekend of shooting because a Boy Scout troop came through. And so everybody went to the hotel and just hung out. We came back, and crews all standing around one of the cabins, which was just an empty cabin that was converted to look like the bathroom scene where one of the girls gets an axe in the face. So she comes out of the shower, she gets an axe in the face. They had some toilets that are fake. Well, the Boy Scouts didn't know they were fake. So we're still there, the art department is standing around outside going, well, I'm not going to clean it, you got to clean it.
That's fun.
That's one of the stories.
We actually went there for the Novi Bosco. They do very limited tours, but every now and then they do tours of the campgrounds for fans. And we went for one of the camp tours, and we saw that room that you're talking. It's just an empty room.
It's just an empty room.
So there's that one wall where they put for the movie, they put the fake sinks, and then on the other side they put the fake toilets. So I know exactly where you're talking about.
I'm not cleaning it, you clean it.
And then,
Tell the Boy Scouts. Who's going to tell the Boy Scouts?
and then just for Friday the 13th, just to clarify, you were Miss Voorhees' hands at the end, right?
That's right.
So those are your hands. And
Yep.
then were you the hand that cut Annie's throat too, or was that
I
Tom?
am the hand that cuts Annie's throat, so I play
Okay.
the killer right at the very beginning,
Okay.
as Robbie Morgan.
Yes.
That was really cool effect.
That's one of the coolest effects in the movie. That's a
Right.
really good. It's so simple,
It was very simple.
Yeah.
All she had to do was lean her head back, and it would gape open.
and she just does the swallow, then the blood
and
comes out. Yeah.
We because we stopped at Dick Smith's house before we went there, and he gave us a bunch of ideas, including the tubes to run and how to make the blood formula,
Okay.
the blood flow, and make it look so realistic.
And how long do you think you guys were there in the cabins? Like, how long did it?
We were there maybe 3 months.
Really? Okay. Nice.
Seems like it. I'm pretty sure we were there about 3 months.
Have you been back there since or no?
I don't think so.
No.
I'd love to. We had a place where we would go Tom and I would go to this place called the Glen, and it was just like that. It was beautiful, waterfall, rocks, trees. It was just a forest walk. But we went there, camped out. It was just great.
Nice.
Something occurs to me that's come up a little bit on the stage already. And you mentioned Dick Smith and talking about Tom and your work. I'm just curious. these are movies that stand the test of time. Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th. So many of these movies that all use practical effects, and you can look back and you can say, oh, this one's crude, this one's not, but for the most part, they hold up, and there's a reality to it. What's your take on the shift towards CGI, and do you see a value in that as well, or what do you think?
I can see why it happens. I mean, it's obvious that we're going that way. Anything you can dream up now, you can invent on the computer, and there's dragons flying, and instead of 100 extras playing zombies, you got 10, and then you CGI the other 90. I never liked it because it puts actors out of work. I never liked it because it's cheating. I never liked it because it kills the creativity of the artists. I guess computer generators are artists in a way too. So, but you know, for us that were there at the beginning making it, it just seemed so much more fun. I don't know. Yeah, you had something.
I do, yeah. You know, thank you, Taso. What size sweetie foot do you? You can borrow them. You can borrow these. The movie industry has always been a technology-driven industry. Even if you look at it from the very beginning, and every technological shift, whether it was black and white to color, whether it was silent to sound, there were people that said it's going to be bad. It's just not going to work. And even when sound came in, most movie theaters kept their silent projectors that ran at 17 frames per second, you know, ran slower, because they thought it was a fad. CGI, you can't beat practical. Practical looks real. I mean, it's just because it is. But CGI has evolved. There was a time where it was really fake. It just looked really, really fake. Now we've gotten to the point where we're shooting on a 2K or 4K, you know, or even 6Ks now. We're shooting on these cameras that can get so detailed that you can sort of blend all the digital CGI with what you're shooting. So it doesn't look as fake anymore. And it's just one of those technological moves, you know, that you kind of have to accept.
You know, imagine, and I'm watching these movies, and the second time I go and watch the movie, I can't help thinking how hard it must be as an actor to be fighting and talking and acting in a big room that's covered in green felt. And there's nothing there, but of course in the script there's a gigantic fish coming to eat you behind you. It must be really difficult.
The thing that gets me is that when they're doing the Hobbit movies, and there's that story of Ian McKellen
There's two rooms.
where like they did the Lord of the Rings stuff and they did a lot of practical stuff, but there was CGI. But then the Hobbit ones was mainly all done on green screen.
All green
And the
screen.
famous story early on is that Ian McKellen apparently was doing a scene on green screen with nothing but tennis balls.
Tennis balls.
And broke down at the end of the day and started screaming, "This is not why I went to the Royal Shakespeare thing." And he couldn't. And it's like, yeah, on the one hand, you argue, well, look, man, you're getting a fortune, you're doing a big budget movie. On the other hand, acting is reacting, acting is behavior and
Exactly
emotion.
right.
And how do you emote with a tennis ball and a green
They
screen?
made two rooms, and Ian is in one room with tennis balls, and the other guys are in the other room because it was a different size.
Yes, right.
And so he's got to pretend that he's talking to these guys that aren't even in the same room. And there's cameras around. Must be incredibly good.
I have to say that I've worked with some actors who had less talent than tennis balls. So I guess it's a quid pro quo.
They're perfect for green screen.
Yeah, that's what they're the green screen actors.
They're green screen actors.
You know, but imagine, I guess, here I'm backing up. Imagine if they had that back then. It wouldn't have been Dawn of the Dead. It would have been a different movie. All the things that we thought of in our head, I got a script, I got this great script, but nobody's going to do it because how you can't make dragons fly. Now you can. Pretty much anything you can think of, you know, make it on the screen. But back then, you had to figure out how to, you know, they had puppets. King Kong was, you know, this big, and he moved it a little bit. They took a frame and they moved it. Harryhausen, all these puppets. That was, but it was still a scary creature. There it was. It was
And-
alive.
It had life to it, exactly.
And you had to wait a week. We had to wait a week to see if it worked because,
Just talking to Mike about it.
yeah, film had to go to LA, get processed, get transferred, get sent back. You had to watch it, and if you didn't get something, you were screwed a lot of times, but you didn't know. Now it's instantaneous. You know whether it's working. You can even see now, you can key a green screen shot, you can key it now, and you can just sit and watch it on a monitor and make your adjustments. You know, filmmaking is completely different today than what it was. The difference between what we did and what's happening today is the difference between us and Birth of a Nation, you know, in many ways.
That's a good point. It also occurs to me too that like we've talked in various ways with some of the other folks already about how this movie that we're really all here to celebrate stands the test of time, has, you know, inspired so many people, fans, to embrace it. But I guess an interesting way of looking at it too is, what do you think the role it and some of the other work you guys and Romero did has played in inspiring the next generation of filmmakers, the people that then also want to create something, whether it's an effect or a film?
Tom's got a whole school teaching kids to do special effects and stuff he did. I don't know how many kids have graduated. Thousands already graduated. So there they are. They're out there doing it. They got their own TV show where they're competing for special effects.
It's a face-off on Sci-Fi, yeah.
And Savini students win often. Just ask Greg Nicotero if The Walking Dead would exist if it wasn't for Dawn of the Dead. And, you know, and I teach at Point Park in the cinema department. Almost every one of my students has been influenced by Romero and what we do, you know, what we did here. So it really has a great influence on the next generation and the next generation. Because, you know, Dawn came out in 78, 79. And so, you know, here we are 40 years later, and students are still being influenced by the work, you know. We hear it a lot, even when we're at the table, you know. The reason I got into film, or the reason I love horror movies, is because Dawn of the Dead, you know. Some people like Day of the Dead, so, yeah. But, you know, Dawn more so, I think, in a larger audience that way.
Anyone? Yes.
Just to touch on Day of the Dead, back when the script was twice as thick, do you have any insight on that that's not very well?
Only rumors. Mike Gornick is here, and he can probably give you a lot more detail. I heard that one of the original ideas George really fought for and never got in was the training of the zombies. Remember how they would catch them in the caves and bring them in, and he would experiment on them. And he had them in one of the original scripts. They were actually color-coded, red, yellow, and blue zombies, and they did different tricks. They were at different levels of training. So they realized they couldn't get rid of them. So what do you do with them? Well, we try to teach them not to eat us. Can we do that? And so he had a whole storyline about that, and it just got swept away.
It's interesting, by the way, too, that like some of the bits and pieces that we know of that were in the big epic script, he then revisited for Land of the Dead when he had the community of the wealthy that were trying to hole out. And if this new project he's working on, Road of the Dead, comes together, and they're supposed to be doing his next one, Road of the Dead, involves zombies being trained to drive race cars for entertainment. So it's Romero zombies meet Mad Max Fury Road.
Are they going to drive slow or fast?
That's what we're going to find out. Will they be on a green screen when they're doing it? So who knows? It could happen.
Who's changing the tires?
That's right. Any other questions? Yes. Did you work on The Burning?
I did not work on The Burning. I had a lot of friends that worked on The Burning. Holly Hunter, I think. Patty Tallman?
Yeah, Patty did stunts.
Right. A lot of friends, and I don't know why, I was doing something else. But there was something else shooting right down the street from Friday the 13th. Mother's Day? Something like that. There
was like one a week happening.
There's another film shooting not far away, and the crew would visit each other. Here's a little tidbit. When Friday the 13th went to the theaters, it became a pretty big hit. Steve Miner called me at Tom's house. He said, "Where's Taso?" And he said, "He's right here." He said, "Do you want to be Jason for the next movie?" I said, "Nah, no thanks." Next time,
what could have been?
What was your reason?
You want me to sign one of my Friday the 13th pictures? I'll let you kick me in the balls.
What was your reason for saying no?
What?
Why did you say no?
It's a good question. Because Tom asked me the same thing. He said, "Are you fucking nuts?"
Yeah.
Sorry about that. And so, you know, I wanted to stop doing stunts and special effects. I wanted to go back into acting, which I didn't realize, of course, at that moment. That's exactly what that was. That's another Frankenstein monster. There was a moment where I could have been the star actor, but to me it was just another, you know, put on a mask and just do stunts and some more special effects. It didn't occur to me until later because I'm a slow thinker. I had to think about it, and of course by the time I thought it out, it was too late.
They recast
Well,
it.
it may not have been Jason, but he was certainly part of iconic films like Dawn of the Dead. We're actually
They
all out of
weren't-
time,
At the time, they weren't.
but
We
they are
didn't know
now.
that this was going to happen.
Now we know.
Now we know.
And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for being here, and thanks very much to Taso Marty. And by the way, don't forget, folks, you guys have some stuff over at the table there for everyone.